Anne Mugford, known for reasons best known to herself and her friends as Micky Mugford, joined the BBC just a couple of years after the end of the Second World War. Now, in the intervening decade, of course, attitudes have changed enormously, and I'd venture to suggest particularly even more so to young women. So let me ask you, first of all, Micky, your first job interview. How did it go? What was it like?
I have every memory of going to Broadcasting House. I loved the entrance hall and the doors to get in there and the lifts. And the whole thing was very moving. And in those days you had to wear a hat and gloves, most certainly stockings. I think you'd been sent away if you didn't. And my mother accompanying me. And we got advice, and I departed and took the advice. So when I came back, it was the same personnel woman, and she had already worked out where she wanted me to go. So off I went to recorded programmes on the 5th floor, and that was interesting. The women were interesting but sad. And the reason I said sad was they were all something like 10 years older than me, and they'd all served in the forces in the war. They'd all had fiancés or husbands or boyfriends who died. In some cases, I even saw them die on a runway. So it was very raw for them. And I was just straight from school. I was different straight away.
Do you consider yourself sort of generationally blessed in that
Yes.
you joined, the war was over?
Yes, well, there was no television during the war.
No.
It stopped absolutely on the 3rd of September, 1939. Immediately it became a military place, really, and a lot of rather secret work going on.
Your very first job, of course, that was before you went into television, was in radio. What actually was that job?
It was broken down to 3 sections. I was in the copyright section, which, if you like, was the least glamorous. And we just handled the future and the length of duration of keeping a disc. I didn't physically touch the discs, not ever. And they were across the corridor, the whole big library. But they were all squashed in too, which I thought was rather alarming. There was one man attached to our section, and he did all the manual work, and he had his own office, and you sort of deserved a medal if you went to his room, actually. Wasn't very pleasant. But his job was to handle the discs. I didn't. I just handled the paperwork and the destination of these. Some of them you could keep more or less forever. Some went after 3 months. So it was just, we were the filter.
And of course, later you were upgraded, you became someone's secretary. What was your status like with your new boss?
Fine. The first one I was close to was Joanna Spicer. There were 2 marvellous women at the top of the tree. Joanna was one. I shared an office with her. And what I found particularly interesting was how she handled all the men who came one after another in for a little meeting with her. And they were always begging for more resources, more money, more something. And she would flirt a bit outrageously and then say, no, you can't have any more money or whatever. So she was tough, but she also flirted. And it completely nonplussed the men. They couldn't think how to handle her, so she got away with it, really.
But of course, later on, you were in charge of budgets, and you had to tell the grown-ups that they couldn't spend as much as they wanted to. I mean, was that tricky for you?
Well, I had to choose my words with care to make any impression at all. At the end of the day, you were pleading with their better natures. One hoped they had some. But I particularly remember Rudolph Cartier because he couldn't give a damn how much money he spent. He wanted a good show and a good programme, and I suppose that is understandable. And he thought sort of being cheese pairing was not to anybody's advantage. So I had to find my way. I think they were probably very surprised, somebody as young as me, doing it, and a female. But they were very, I can't say respectful, I'm not sure quite what the right word is, but they certainly listened to me.
Or perhaps you
They heard me out.
Perhaps they flirted with them as well.
Possibly. I don't recall. I might have done.
And then, of course, you worked on the script section with as I understand it, some pretty posh people.
Yes, I did.
For example?
Well, if you mean Sir Basil Bartlett, he was a very quiet man, actually, and missing rather often. So we all sort of managed without him. We knew what we had to do. What he was doing, I don't know, but he wasn't there quite often. He wasn't a trouble.
It's reassuring.
He let you get on with the job. Didn't inquire too much.
Sure. So, I mean, as I understand it, you became secretary to one of the bosses who also had to make some pretty appalling programmes.
Oh, Hugh Walton, yes. Is this your problem? That really was ghastly. It was, I think, the first realistic programme where the public could, in effect, dictate the programme. And it was all the letters flooding in with people who had a problem in their family. It was for me to open the envelopes and do a little synopsis and staple it to the letter and then hand over to Hugh Walton. And I would do it as succinctly as I could, but I'd usually end up by saying, nothing here for us. and they were tragedies. They were the people we were talking about. We couldn't change tragedies. And it was, the programme came from Edana Romney and Edgar Lusgarten, and they seemed to have considerable influence in the place. And we had a bishop, George Randorp, Bishop of Guildford, and a top psychologist whose name was something like Stafford Clark. And those two were regulars. And one got to know them. I think it was a fortnightly programme. That's what my memory tells me. And it was my job to try and get the people who were going to be honoured, members of the public, try and relax them. The drinks cupboard was opened. They were given a drink. And there was certainly a drink when they finished. And then my last job of the day was to lock up the drinks cupboard, and then I could go home. So my job was pretty varied, really.
It certainly sounds like it. But of course, as you say, you weren't there very long because you announced you were going to leave to get married.
Yes.
I mean, could you not have carried on working even though you were married, or was that?
No, because it was going to be Hampshire we lived. I knew that. We met through sailing. My husband sailed in the Solent. I was mostly the Thames because it was easy in there. And I just knew we were going to be somewhere midway between the two. Philip was always in Hampshire, so it was going to be Hampshire. And for me to have refused the offer that they made would have meant cancelling getting married.
Television, it was still very much the pioneering days, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Lovely. It was a good atmosphere. I mean, that's what gave me a chance all the time, all this pioneering. I mean, you wouldn't get the same chance in today's atmosphere, I'm quite certain. So I was lucky. It was just the right time to be doing it. Yes.
And I take it that a lot of the people that you work with, your bosses, they were, if you like, they were chancers, weren't they?
huge egos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, you met that all the time, and you learned to live with that. But they could also be very jolly. Hugh could be very funny. I mean, one morning he went off to find music for Is This Your Problem? Came back and said, I found it. And in great glee, he said, it's called Morning Sickness. Yeah. But there was a lot of laughter. And we were in Lime Grove again, back in Lime Grove in one of the houses, ground floor this time. Drama had been on the first floor, but with Hugh it was the ground floor. And the great big sash windows, and quite the easiest way to get out to the street was to get through a window. So anybody in neighbouring offices, if it was lunchtime and they wanted to go out, they would come through our office and through a window. So there was a constant traffic of people. And a lot of sort of, nobody could go through saying nothing, so a lot of nonsense and talk too. But it was quite convivial, quite actually amusing to have the window available.
It sounds quite crazy to me. I mean,
Well,
what was wrong with the doors?
Just crazy. It was quite torturous to go down the various corridors and go out the front door, which of course you should do. But it was so handy just to have our window nearby that's the way they came. Well, I knew David Attenborough then well too, very well.
Was he a nice guy?
Very nice. We shared a taxi home quite often. And if we were both going home at about the same time, he'd say, come on, my home was halfway to his home. He lived in Richmond, and he may still live in Richmond for all I know. Very much the Attenborough family there. So yes, no, he was very pleasant, very good.
I mean, it's quite interesting when you talked about the window, for example, and the convivia. I mean, one has a perception of the attitudes, the social attitudes of the period, of people being rather stiff and reserved.
No, not at all. None of that. No. I mean, they were relatively young. The whole thing was rather exciting. I think that probably stirred them up a bit more than otherwise. I did take myself off to the studio and go up and see into the control gallery and see what was going on. Fascinated. My very great friend was a version mixer. I knew them all, the people, and nobody seemed to say, what are you doing here? Kindly do something else. Go and do your own job. No, they just thought that somebody showing interest was to be encouraged.
OK, now you worked for and with Hugh Weldon, who went on to be, of course, the Director General of the BBC, and you used to have to take dictation from him, and he wasn't necessarily, I get the impression, particularly good at dictating.
Oh, God, no. There were no commas or full stops. It just went on and on and on. You couldn't sort of draw breath. You couldn't think, You had to go fast. Your shorthand had to be remarkably good. And I got lost, but I managed. I got away with it.
Did you help him along a little bit with his phraseology or whatever?
I don't think he needed help. No. Very good vocally. Very good altogether, really. Yes. And the days that when we had Is This Your Problem, he always wanted to go for a long walk just before the programme, up to Notting Hill Gate. So he insisted I accompany him. Well, I didn't find sort of going uphill on a long walk, and Christopher will recognise this in me. Didn't think that was a nice way to start a programme at all. I'd rather be very quiet somewhere else, but not being physically terribly active. But that was his line.
You also worked for Michael Barry, and you used to have to take dictation from him and whatnot. I mean, were some of these people, like Michael Barry, for example, somewhat eccentric in some ways?
He was eccentric insofar as he wouldn't just sit in a chair, he walked round the room. He'd tried taking long steps, and then he'd grab a glass of water, a jug of water.
A jug of water.
And drink straight from the jug in the middle of sentence almost, and put that down and go on. He didn't lose sort of concentration. It was also sort of startling to try and struggle to take dictation as well as watch a man drinking from a jug. Was really rather nonplussing. Yes.
But he wasn't intimidating. He was just a bit bonkers, is what you're saying.
He was just one would like to laugh, but it wasn't the moment for laughing. So one didn't. But it was just silly, really. Yes. But they were characters. They were all strong characters, and they weren't going to change. And they didn't have a sort of conformity between them.
I suppose, as you say, we're talking fairly pioneering sort of period.
Absolutely.
If they weren't characters and they weren't a bit eccentric, nothing would have happened.
Yeah. The egos were the great thing. So long as you didn't ruffle that, you were all right. Perfectly all right.
Society was very different back then. I mean, effectively,
Yes,
it was a small coterie of very posh people who ran everything in London, and I take it was the same at the BBC.
Yes. It had a sort of tightness, London, a smaller circle that really were influential. And we were all very happy we'd won the war. We could hold our heads up high. And there was so much that needed doing, so many bombed areas, new buildings needed, everything. It was almost refreshing. There was so much that needed doing. And there were the people who had the ability to see all this and implement their ideas. And it was a tight-knit circle, obviously far fewer in number, and your best friend could be doing something equally interesting. So this was a great link, sort of round in a circle. And the same thing happened in the BBC. Those people who returned from war and wanted to get back into something different to what they'd done before, everything had to be different. And that was also a very strong feeling to pre-war ways of doing things.
During that period, because there was all this sort of casual interchange, you must have actually bumped into, quite randomly, quite a lot of people whose names would to this day be familiar.
Yes, it was. The canteen was a great place for this. Yes, if they were in the middle of working there, doing a programme, rehearsing, whatever they were doing, they would come and use the canteen just as the staff did. And they would, if they had any reason to know you even slightly, they would probably choose to sit at your table and you get into conversation. So, yes, you met the actors and the actresses. Benny Hill I bumped into in the street. What was happening was I was tickling the top of the head of a cat that was sitting on a wall. And he just said, "Wish you'd do that to me." And we both shrieked with laughter and just had a laugh for a few minutes. So there he was in Lime Grove, just very near one of my windows that we walked through, as I remember. Yeah, but Peter Sallis joined us, any number of people. One just got to know them.
During your 7 years at the BBC, you did a whole variety of different jobs, not only a variety of different jobs, but, as I understand it, in different locations.
Very true, all of them. You started, Broadcasting House was fun, 5th floor, looked out on the sort of bombed area at the back, absolutely flattened. Yes, and as I remember it, the canteen was down in a sort of double basement. I think it went down even 2 stories. And so you went, and certainly no windows down there. Yes, so starting off I was lucky to be Broadcasting House, really, because it could have been there were any number of establishments in London that were BBC.